Hi there, Jen. So glad to have you here on the Seasons of Motherhood conversation.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So, you were so gracious in sharing your story of your mom and your journey of your childhood and how it's kind of unfolded into your own motherhood and your own mothering. And I loved your post so much, and I want to share it with other people so that they can as well be encouraged as I have been encouraged. So, maybe you can share a little bit about what prompted you to write this post and to honor your mom, which I think is so important, to honor our parents in any way that we can. And you do it so beautifully. So maybe give us a little bit of a backstory to your beginnings of your life with your mom.
Okay, I'd love to. I think it's so important to be able to honor your parents. And I feel like my mom's story and the impact that she had is just, it means a lot to me. I didn't realize the impact as a child, but now as a mom, I just can't believe all she did. So I'll just give you a bit of background.
Okay.
So my mom was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. So she decided to adopt because during pregnancy, if you have that disease, it gets worse. So even right from the start, I feel like she was lovingly looking out for me through adoption. So I was adopted as a baby. My dad, unfortunately, left when I was 3. So that left just me and my mom. And so not only a single mom, but a single mom with a diagnosis that was very unknown at the time.
Right.
And so now looking back at mom, I think, wow, that must have been so scary.
Yeah.
In about grade 7, I was at camp and she had a massive seizure, taken down to Toronto St. Mike's Hospital. And basically my dad picked me up from camp and said, this is what's happened to your mom. We need to go say goodbye to her.
Wow.
And of course, that's devastating for me. And just like, don't get me wrong, those years were not easy. I took on very much a caretaker role versus, it wasn't a normal mother-daughter relationship. I just remember this big steel hospital door and it opening, and my mom's one side of her head was shaved because she was going in for brain surgery to get the tumor out. It was the size of a football, if you can believe it, down her neck.
I cannot believe that.
And they gave her like a 3% chance of living. So basically I'm going in as a 12-year-old to say goodbye to my mom.
Oh, Jen.
Fast forward from then on, she died in 2012. So
it's incredible. So incredible.
Thinking I'm going to say goodbye to her, but from that point on, she never came out of care. So she has lived in a hospital care type setting for 35 years. That's amazing. So to watch somebody you love suffer, but suffer well, I can't describe the impact that has had on me.
Wow.
Even looking back now as a mom myself, how difficult that would have been. And so that's kind of where the story started. Like, it was not an easy life for her. It was not an easy life for me. And yet I come to this point and I just think, wow, I see God's fingerprints all over the story. And I'm so grateful for a mother who a lot of people would look at and say, how could you have had an impact?
Right.
And yet I feel like her impact is much greater than maybe it could have been had she been healthy.
That is an incredible perspective. And I think that's what I love so much about your blog post. In fact, my favorite quote, you say, Mom, you were so strong and brave. You were selfless and you did the absolute best you could. You have taught me through your example what persevering through suffering looks like, what joy can look like in the midst of pain, and what complete trust in Jesus and his sovereignty truly means. Jen, that quote is so powerful. And it's hard to even put into words the impact of just that quote alone. But what your mom was able to do, despite what people would look at as complete negativity and not able to do anything, but she was able to do so much. And I know you talk a little bit about that. What kinds of things did she do that impacted you and even to your kids today for you?
Yes, there's so much. If I was to list 3 things that I think there's so many, but if I was to pick 3 things that I take away from having her as my mom in this situation, doing the best she could, it would be her perseverance, her ultimate trust in God, and the power of prayer.
Wow.
So she couldn't do a lot, but she sure could pray. And let me tell you, I feel like I am where I am today because of the prayers of my mother all those years in that hospital bed. Her eyesight would get worse, so we started sending her, the Bible was it for her. And so she had a regular Bible, then her eyes got worse, the bigger Bible, to the point where my husband and I were sending duotangs of books of the Bible with like 60 font.
Wow.
I'm telling you, we went through a lot of printer cartridges just so that she could read it. And that's all she wanted. And so when she passed away in 2012, the striking thing to me in cleaning out her room was, we had a stack of 7 Bibles. She had pictures of her grandkids, and that was it. Like, it just struck me like, this is what is important. She had such an eternal perspective that I think we can be so distracted by in our life today.
I agree.
That we're not thinking eternally. No. Well, her hope was in heaven, and that was communicated to me so clearly and has motivated me to try and have that same eternal perspective.
Wow, what an impact. And it's so profound because like you talk about, our lives are cluttered and our lives are busy, and we don't go back to the essential, the most important thing, which is the Word of God. And God used her so mightily because she was obedient to that. She allowed herself in the midst of suffering to persevere through prayer, to model, no matter what, God is first, and I'm going to get through this, and I'm going to pray, and I'm going to do this for my kids and for my grandkids. And it's so beautiful, Jenn, so beautiful. And I wonder how your kids, how do you feel they have been impacted by their grandma and what they've seen kind of through you? What's the impact on them?
Well, I think the impact is incredible for them. They learned such compassion and empathy, and they could see if grandma can persevere through this type of life, hanging on to Jesus, trusting in Jesus, and doing it with joy, then I certainly can. Absolutely. And that to this day, we have young adult children, and that to this day is, I would say, is one of their foundational memories, actually, is because my mom's favorite verse was, "Rejoice in the Lord always. I say it again, rejoice. Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near."
Well, I think what I'd like to just close with is just one little question about how you might encourage a mom right now that's perhaps a single mom. Maybe she grew up in a home with a single mom. What encouragement could you give a mom today? Maybe just a little thing to leave with them that you learned along the way to encourage others?
I think one thing that I would like to encourage young moms would be that you might not see the impact that you're having on your kids right now, but it will come. When I was a child with my mom and having to do a lot more than normal kids would have to do, I wasn't doing that joyfully. I didn't understand. I didn't have the capacity to understand the sacrifices my mom was making. So if you're a mom and you're not feeling like you're impacting your kids, I just want to encourage you. You are impacting them, whether you feel it or not, and whether they see it or not. It wasn't until I grew up and could look back, till I could kind of get out of the forest and look down and see, wow, this is an impact. And I remember when my mom was sick for so long, like, it's so hard watching somebody suffer for years. I remember pleading with the Lord and saying, God, why so long? Why so long? Even if you're not feeling like you're making an impact, you are making an impact. Your kids are watching. I would just encourage you to be faithful in what you know to do. And the other thing is, I should mention, Sandy, is my mom didn't have a choice to trust God or to not trust God with me. She physically couldn't do that. Right. No, she couldn't physically do it. She wasn't there to do it, like through my teenage years.
Right.
And yet she was an awesome mom. Yeah. So the fact that she completely had to trust God.
Right.
Like I know me as a parent, I try and trust God, but then I put my own hands in it. And I think maybe I've got a good idea, that sort of thing. But ultimately, it's God who has our kids, right? He has them in his hands. So despite when we think we can do it all, we really can't. And so I would just like to encourage you, do your best, be faithful. We're going to make mistakes. Trust that you're making an impact, but most of all, trust God and his faithfulness and love for your kids and family.
Wow, Jenn, these are such beautiful foundational truths to share with other moms. And I know that there will be people watching and listening being so encouraged by the fact that you have chosen to persevere through prayer and be faithful as well in your own family, and being able to look back and learn from your mom in the hardest of times, in the suffering. So thank you, Jenn, for sharing your heart today and your story, and for the blog post. So I encourage people to head over to my blog at sandymcgregor.com to read Jenn's post to honor her mom. So thank you, Jenn, for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Anytime.